Guys, welcome to a classic movie review of 1982's The Thing, starring Kurt Russell, Wilford, Brimley and Keith David. Directed by John Carpenter, this is a masterpiece of the horror and science fiction genres. A nerve-wracking experience that remains intense and quite shocking to this day. Based on John W. Campbell Jr.'s 1938 novella, Who Goes There? This takes a familiar science fiction concept, a shape-shifting alien, and transforms it into a chilling exploration of isolation, paranoia, and the fear of the unknown. Another cult classic that suffered a bit of a box office failure and critical ambivalence. The Thing has, of course, since been recognised as one of the greatest horror films ever made. Let's take a look.
I know I'm human. And if you were all these things, then you'd just attack me right now. So some of you are still human. This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation.
So 1982's The Thing brings us to a remote Antarctic research station, centering on a group of scientists and researchers who encounter a mysterious alien life form that had been frozen in the ice. Now, after an ambiguous opening that sees a Norwegian helicopter chasing a dog towards their station, the research crew will quickly come to discover that this is not an ordinary canine, and that it has in fact been infected and assimilated by a parasitic alien that can mimic any living organism it encounters. As the creature begins to take over members of the station, the survivors must contend with an escalating sense of distrust and dread. With no way of knowing who is human and who is alien, the group fractures, turning on one another in a desperation to survive. And it emerges that our protagonist here is J.R. MacReady, played by Kurt Russell, the station's helicopter pilot who emerges as the hero amid the growing chaos. And for me, what makes The Thing a masterpiece isn't just its jaw-to-the-floor visual effects, which we'll get into, and its jump-scare terror, but the fact that the battle becomes not just a physical one against each other and the Thing for survival, but a psychological one for trust and identity. That terrifying idea that no one can trust anyone, fused with the film's setting, an isolated, snow-covered research station, creates a broad daylight claustrophobia that's extremely difficult to pull off. And you can get all arty-farty with it and comment on how the vastness and emptiness of the frozen landscape mirrors the crew's psychological states. They're isolated not only from civilization, but from each other, and in a place where survival demands cooperation. Or you can just ignore all the existential battles for identity and focus on the excitement of one of the great creature features in movie history. Because, of course, one of the defining aspects of The Thing is its unrelenting and mind-boggling body horror brought to life by special effects legend Rob Bottin. The alien's ability to mimic and assimilate other organisms is basically giving Bottin carte blanche to go totally nuts and present some of the most disturbing practical effects ever captured on screen. When we see the Thing morph, its transformation isn't slick and stealthy. It's violent and painful and chaotic, giving us some of the most unsettling imagery still yet to be seen in the genre. And Carpenter has no interest in shying away or filming in the shadows. This is unflinching stuff. We get to see the full extent of every grotesque mutation. Now, of course, this stands as a counterpoint to many modern CGI stuffed horror movies. The 2011 prequel to this is the perfect example, which, don't worry, we will come to in a minute or two, but there's, of course, a tactile physicality inherent in practical on-set animatronics that just can't be beaten. Anyway, another standout feature of The Thing is its portrayal of human characters under stress. The crew, once a well-functioning team of scientists, gradually devolve into distrustful, paranoid individuals. The slow collapse of the group dynamic as they begin to suspect each other of being infected adds an emotional weight to the film's horror. The central and famous blood test scene here is a great example of this, as most of the team is tied up as MacReady tests a sample of their blood to see which one of them has been taken over. There's probably no better part of the film to showcase the mixture of fear, suspicion, tension, and even black comedy. And trust me, the scene comes to a surprising and extremely gloopy conclusion.
This is pure nonsense. Doesn't prove a thing.
I thought you'd feel that way, Gary. You were the only one that could have got to that blood. We'll do you last.
Now, Kurt Russell was at the dawn of his true stardom here, despite having acted since the early 60s. He'd worked with Carpenter, of course, on previous years' Escape from New York, another cult favourite, and they'd team up again in 1986 for Big Trouble in Little China, another cult favourite. His portrayal of MacReady here is, of course, quite charismatic, but also has that everyman forced to step up when things go wrong vibe. He's believable as a practical, survival-orientated leader, but also as a guy on the edge. Now, Russell makes sure the character doesn't often give in to emotion or panic. He takes that scientific approach, attempting to analyse the alien's weakness as per the aforementioned blood test sequence. And he wants to hold the group together, but he is also aware that under the circumstances, that's easier said than done.
Trust's a tough thing to come by these days.
Now, in my personal opinion, this is by far John Carpenter's greatest work. The thing has a deliberate pace and it builds slowly and carefully, the director allowing the suspense to rise gradually. For a long time, we avoid quick scares in favour of sustained dread. The film really needs that slow burn because it's contrasted by moments of what the BBFC like to call strong violence and gory horror. And the whole thing's scored by composing legend Ennio Morricone, who weaves in haunting minimalist music that paints a picture of the icy wasteland outside, but also the creeping dread within. Now, I'm going to take a slight detour here and mention the 2011 prequel that, hear me out, actually isn't a terrible movie, but was seemingly sabotaged by its own creators. For a start, it is a prequel that fills in the blanks from the ambiguous opening moments to this movie. However, some genius decided to name it The Thing, which basically told audiences that it was a reboot or a remake rather than a prequel, which is beyond daft. Anyway, the real mind boggler was that they shot the movie using practical special effects and puppetry, but then decided to replace it all with CGI as they didn't think it held up well. Well, I can tell you that the work Rob Bottin did 40 years ago still holds up, but the CGI in the 2011 prequel already looks like a PlayStation cutscene. But anyway, back to the original, which of course isn't the original. As I mentioned, it was both based on John W. Campbell Jr.'s 1938 novella Who Goes There, which in turn was made into the classic 1951 sci-fi masterpiece The Thing from Another World, directed by Christian Nyby, which of course has The Thing as a 7-foot-tall superhuman monster, which of course is very 1950s. This 82 version, though, was developed in an era of Cold War tensions between the United States and Soviet Union, but being a reimagining of a 50s film, it also harkens back to that American Red Scare of the 50s and the 60s. But the threat here is technically unseen, and so for me, this also lets it nudge into that late 70s, early 80s slasher bracket, an evil entity picking off people one by one in a single location. Now, this is another film for me where the VHS cover, which I think was this one in the UK, made you both frightened and curious as to what was going on that magnetic tape. It's amazing that this film was met upon initial release with mixed reactions, some calling it instant junk and wretched excess. It famously was not helped by being released alongside Spielberg's E.T., which of course was both critically and commercially successful. It seems odd to release a movie like this in the summer also, as it's clearly a film for these colder months, but anyway, The Thing has since become a classic, a film that I can watch just over and over again. Now, this film stands as a milestone of both the horror and the science fiction genres. I think I read somewhere that this is Carpenter's favourite movie of his own movies. Here he is working on his top form. This is bleak and gruesome and not for the faint of heart, but it's also aged extremely well and remains pretty much the gold standard of what can be achieved with practical special effects. A meditation on the fear of the unknown and the breakdown of the human psyche. And it also has a head that rips itself off a body and then grows spider legs and runs off. So go check it out.
If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies. Nobody left to kill it. And then it's one.